Welcome to day 2 of our week-long series focusing on the threat of a terrorist attack on our nation's schools. On yesterday's program, we covered some of the evidence in the so-called isolated incidents that have led some experts to believe that our schools and school buses may be a target in this country. Tonight, I want to shift gears a bit and tell you about a school that was already a target. It was 3 years ago this month. Chechen terrorists took control of a middle school in Beslan, Russia, held over 1,000 people hostage for nearly 3 days. When it was all over, 330 hostages were dead. At least 172 of them were small children. If you are anything like me, that's probably the extent of what you know about Beslan. Unfortunately, there is so much more that has been covered up and not told. If you have children in the room, this is not for them. I beg you, I warn you, this is not something they should see. Change the channel now. You also may not want to hear what really happened. It is gruesome, brutal stuff. If that's you, change the channel now and come back in 10 minutes. Brad Thord, the author of the new book, First Commandment, and former member of the Homeland Security's analytic Red Cell program, is back. And tonight we also welcome John Geidick. He is the author of Terror at Beslan. John, I want to start with you, and if you can bring me through what happened at Beslan, start with a first rounded up the biggest guys, the biggest students, and the dads, right? And what did they do?
Well, first they had forced everybody into the gym. One of the very first things they did was take the 16 largest males, fathers, school teachers, teenage boys, took them to a classroom on the second floor and lined them up against the wall. We did see the film that they had shot when they did this, shot them all to death and dumped their bodies out the second-story window where they would lie there through the days of the siege. Even as they were doing that, the terrorists in the gym with the 1,200 hostages went off on an animalistic, feral rage like nothing anyone had ever seen before.
One of the dads tried to calm the kids down after they killed the 16, right?
Well, in the midst of beating children, they started raping some of the older teenage girls. The hostages were starting to panic. One father did attempt to calm everyone down, and he was shot in the head for his efforts.
I don't want to be sensational here, but I feel it is important that America understands that this is really the only thing that I've heard that is even comparable that man has done to man is Holocaust kind of stuff. I don't want to be sensationalistic here, but to say that some of the children were raped really doesn't describe it. Can you, without being graphic, can you give us some idea of what for 3 days some of these girls went through?
Sir, I don't know if I can do it without being graphic. Again, a number of the older teenage girls were raped. Some were raped with the barrels of AK-47s. For 3 days, these hostages were made to sit inside a sweltering gym with temperatures well over 100 degrees. They had no food. They had no water. They had to relieve themselves where they sat. Mothers stripped kids naked. Adults were stripped down to barest underwear. The mothers were capturing urine in their purses and shoes and anything else they had that would hold fluid. They'd pour it on the children to keep them cool. They'd make them drink it. And the situation got so dire to the point where one girl passed into unconsciousness, wet herself, and children were trying to suck the urine out of her dress.
Brad, who are these people? I mean, we were told these were Chechnyan separatists. I don't think I've ever... I mean, when I learned what really happened, I got to tell you, I don't think I've ever heard anything so bad.
Glenn, since 1995, Al-Qaeda has been organizing everything that's been going on through Chechnya and in Russia. These are Al-Qaeda operatives. They were Al-Qaeda groups. There were men from Chechnya and then men from outside Russia who were part of this siege at Beslan. And the big thing we need to remember here, Glenn, is that Osama bin Laden has told us, what I have visited upon Russia, I will visit upon America 100-fold. This is a dress rehearsal. We've just heard from the expert on it, and if we don't protect ourselves here, it's coming to America.
When we think of what happens in American schools, even Columbine, we think of that as a horror. John, that doesn't even begin to describe what could possibly be coming our way here.
No, absolutely not. And directors of the group I work with were involved in the Columbine investigation. I was at the Bailey School, I was at the Virginia Tech, Norris Hall to do an assessment. And as horrific as those events are, and you can never diminish the horror involved with them, none of these even begins to approach the level of degradation, of murder, of horror visited on hostages by committed terrorists who are targeting children in schools, not only in Russia, but around the world.
America, you need to understand this one thing. They're doing this for a reason. They are going this extra mile for a reason, and I think it's tomorrow, Brad, isn't it, that we describe why
Correct.
This is happening? But you're not being told this in America. Nobody is being told this in America because it is horrifying. And I can't emphasize enough, we have bits and pieces. We are exactly where we were on September 9th, 2001, where everybody said, okay, they're taking flying lessons, but what are they going to do? We know that there are people that are testing our schools, watching our schools, all kinds of things, but we don't have any other information, do we? We don't know where, when, what cities, what states.
It's correct. Law enforcement is interrupting on a regular basis active surveillance of our schools. Tomorrow we're going to talk about why the Islamic terrorists want to force our hand by creating a horrific attack here. And then Thursday, probably most importantly, we're going to talk about what parents need to do to make sure their schools are not a target.
Okay, John, the Russians knew, just like exactly what I'm saying now. We know this information. Quite honestly, the government doesn't want it to come out because it's panic stuff. But that's the reason why you should know it, because you don't want to panic. That's what they want people to do. But they knew that something was up to, 10 days before they knew something was coming, but they didn't know where, right?
The FSB in Russia had developed some intel that a school somewhere might get hit. And, of course, Russia has suffered a long series of mass hostage sieges and other targeting of children in the past. But you're absolutely correct in the similarity, the commonality between what Russia went through and what the U.S. is seeing today. Just with schools and law enforcement I've been involved in, we are seeing hardcore intelligence gathering, reconnaissance being done on schools in quite a number of states throughout the United States.
And Brad, this is what your intelligence is telling you, that the people that you have dealt with all the way from Homeland Security and everything else, that they have the same kind of dots that they had in Russia, but nothing specific.
Exactly. And my sources are terrified that it isn't specific. What can we do? How can we prevent against this? They are worried that we are going to see the same sort of attack that the Russians saw at Beslan.
And this is, they believe, also part of what was supposed to be the perfect day in Russia?
This is exactly that. As a matter of fact, John's excellent book, Terror at Beslan, talks about the fact that Beslan might not have been the only target that day, that school number 1 might not have been the only target, that it was part of a greater scheme to wreak even more havoc and help ignite a real holy war in the Caucasus.
Tomorrow we talk about the perfect day. John, what gives you evidence of that this was a perfect day attempt?
Well, certainly, much like we're getting from al-Qaeda and related groups here in the United States. They told the Russians, they told them over and over what they were going to do if the Russians did not make the concessions they wanted. The United States is in exactly the same circumstance. Certainly
and Tom Ridge, when you were flying back from Beslan, you emailed Tom Ridge and said, I want to meet with you, but did you ever hear back from him?
Our organization had a direct pipeline to one of the top people under Secretary Ridge, and we did offer to fly out there at our expense and brief him, since he had reported to the news media that all the information Homeland Security was getting was through mass media sources.
All right, John, Brad, we'll see you tomorrow night, Brad. Please don't miss tomorrow's episode. We'll tie it all together on why they're doing something like this, possibly. Tomorrow's program, answer the question that is the most important question of the entire series. Why in God's name would somebody do this to us? People say it to me all the time. Glenn, they'd never do that. They'd never hurt our kids. We'd react like animals. You're right, we would. And that's why we're doing this special tomorrow night also. If you have not signed up for our free Perfect Day special reports, please do it right now at glenbeck.com. Tonight, we have a must-read article about Beslan from John Guydick, the guy you just met, along with some exclusive video that we were not able to show you on air tonight. I have read the article, and it is frightening, but it is extraordinarily important information that you must know. Again, The report is completely free. Go to glennbeck.com, sign up right now, and get the list before we send it out. Back in a minute.